I'm Will Hedrick.
And I'm Jordan Schaffer.
And this is Dog Ears and Timestamps, a book club podcast.
We're bringing back, I don't know, I love reading. Dude, it's been fun getting back into it. I didn't have a book this time going through, through the week, so I didn't have anything kind of constantly looking at me like, hey, read me. So, in the back of my mind, it's kind of just like, you need to listen to Beacon 23. Again, kind of like how with the other book, I ended up listening to it over and over and over again. That's definitely what I tried to do for this guy. I ended up cramming kind of for the day for today because I listened mostly to it on Monday and today. But I listened to it three times through today, and even still, it's surprising how much little stuff slips through the cracks if you're not 100% focused on it. So I definitely got a lot reading the last section of Neverwhere. So going back to just listening, it was I feel like I should probably maybe give reading the first section of each of these books a shot, like the first and last section, just to give it a good foundation to make sure I really know about the characters and what's going on. Because obviously I can listen to it over and over again, but it's just, something lost in translation, I guess, when it goes into words, and whenever I read it, it just sticks better. But,
yeah. I wonder what it is exactly that happens that makes it doesn't stick as much.
It could just be me,
and
too.
It could definitely just be like a person-to-person thing for sure.
Yeah, I've never been great with lectures, but I know that you always were that's how you preferred to learn, through a lecture. I don't know, it seemed like you did really well with long-form lectures in school, and I couldn't keep my attention focused and remember what they were talking about and stuff.
Yeah, I think that was mostly just because I was too lazy to engage in any other way. I hated taking notes. Notes never did anything for me. And I was already stuck in the room, so I might as well just pay attention.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's how I looked at it.
Make the best of a bad situation.
Yeah. So I just made it work I guess more than anything, I made the listening to the lecture method work for me rather than it being the way that works for me, if that makes any sense.
No, I got you. No, that makes perfect sense. So you've always been a reader. Have you been enjoying this book? Have you read a lot of sci-fi? I think I'm realizing I haven't read a whole lot of sci-fi.
I haven't read a ton of sci-fi. I'm trying to think right now of what sci-fi books I have read, and I can't really come up with many. I read some of the Halo books when they were first coming out years and years and years ago now. I think I only read maybe 4, maybe 5 of them. And they were all right or whatever. Aside from that, Fahrenheit 451 is kind of literally a sci-fi in a lot of ways. It takes place in the future. There's technology that we don't have. There's that robot dog thing. Mm-hmm. What else? There's other things. I've definitely seen more sci-fi movies and shows and played more sci-fi games than I have read sci-fi books.
Yeah. It seems like my experience into sci-fi goes mainly just the pop culture channels, almost like Star Wars, Star Trek, Elon Musk. The
holy trinity of sci-fi.
Yeah, that's the Neil deGrasse Tyson. You got them all.
That's it. That's all that you have to know for sci-fi. That's literally every sci-fi thing that ever existed.
That's all I know, and it's getting me through it. I liked the genre switch. It was fun for me just because it was... knowing that you were there on the other end, you were going to want to talk about this book in a week, and we had made an agreement to read it. It pushed me to read a book that I probably, to be honest with you, I don't know if I would have stuck with if I had been on my own. If I had just got this book for maybe a free Audible hour listen or whatever, I might not have continued with it. No offense to the writing or the author. It just, for whatever reason, it didn't grab me as fast as Neverwhere seemed to. I seemed to fall into their world, and this one was just... I don't know, you kind of, it's only got the one character, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, and so you kind of, you don't really become him, but you're seeing, he's trying to make you see things through his eyes, and it's just, I guess with Richard it was a little we were learning together, whereas this guy seems to kind of know more what's going on, so he's kind of teaching us. I don't know, it's fun.
Yeah, I just didn't have any expectations going in.
Okay.
Other than knowing that it was a sci-fi book. That was the only expectation I had. I didn't have anything beyond that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I didn't know how I was going to feel about anything that was happening, and at first it was definitely a little bit slow, and it being just such a tonal shift from the last thing that we read
Yeah.
was just a little bit jarring at first, and then as it went on, I think I'm liking it a lot more and more.
Yeah, definitely. The second time through for me was when it was like I really started to enjoy it. It was, I guess, it was less of the laying down the foundation. Like I already kind of knew roughly what was going on, so I could pick up the details and kind of put myself more in their world. Do we know what like time period is? It seems like the future, but it could be the Star Wars thing like a long time ago.
It's definitely the future. It doesn't give any sort of date. I think that there's a point when he's talking about the picture, and when he's talking about whenever he was just reading the wiki. Mm-hmm. I don't think that even then it says 500 years ago this happened or anything like that. It's just all completely dateless, and that's probably completely intentional, so that it's not like anybody can be like, oh, we wouldn't have that kind of technology in 1,000 years, you idiot. Yeah. If you don't date things, then you can't be given shit faults, that don't matter.
Oh yeah, and he's we were doing a little research about Hugh Howey before starting, and I learned he was before an author, he was a yacht captain, like a yacht boat captain. He was also a roofer, and he was a radio technician, which kind of makes a lot of sense for this book. Because, he's the captain, so he talks a lot about, he talks a lot about just boats and ships, in this book. He makes a lot of relations to just, the space in the sea, almost. It's kind of cool how he does that.
I think that, and I think that as we get more of the story, we'll maybe decipher more what the intention behind this was. So it was written in short story parts. At least probably the audiobook edition that you have, and the edition that I have on Kindle is just those parts mushed into one thing so that you don't have to open another file, basically. It's not like a book that was written all in one go, or that was even thought of as a whole book, I don't think. Mm-hmm. I guess we'll find out as we get to the end of each section and see if it ended in any, how it ends and how it may or may not lead to what happens next, or intentionally so, at least.
Yeah, I always feel that there's a little bit that's lost too if you're not in the moment for things that are released in series like that. If you're not literally with it when it's coming out, it kind of loses some of the character that's going on. Kind of like how with Game of Thrones, where everyone is watching right now, it's a phenomenon, not only just for the show, but for the world. Other people are involved, everybody's watching Game of Thrones on Friday or whatever, and
Sundays.
There you go, Sunday and Friday. No one would watch it on Friday. How it was more of a phenomenon than if you were how we have all 5 books, we're catching up on it. He's already written them. It's not like he's releasing them in series and then we get to, that'd be cool if he released them every week and then we did one a week, 1 week behind him. That'd be fun. I don't know, I feel a little bit gets lost in not being there when it happens, but probably not much. It was hard for me to find context, I guess, for how it was getting published. I was trying to research how and why he chose to publish it this way, and it was hard for me to figure that out, I guess. Yeah. That's more what I mean.
He's apparently done it for a couple of other collections, or he has a couple of other collections that are short stories that were almost episodic like this. Okay. I think that's probably just how he writes. He just writes short stories, and then eventually he's like, okay, well, I would just put these into a collection, and then that can be another release of the whole saga or whatever.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because we were looking at his bibliography, and he does do that a lot. I didn't see if he was working on anything right now, but
yeah, I didn't really look up too much. I was reading just very briefly about the book. I didn't really do too much research on him or anything, or even his other writings. I just saw somebody mention that there was a couple of other things released in the same fashion that this was.
Well, cool. So how was your week, man? I just kind of jumped right into how my book was, but how was your week? Did you do anything fun or?
Not too much. On Friday, I went down to New Braunfels to hang out with Jared and his fiance and his cousin and one of his fiance's friends.
Jared is our famous brewing friend. He's you can see him on the YouTube commercial for Shiner coffee beer. Anyway, just in case you want to get a visual for Jared.
Yeah, if you look up Shiner Chameleon Cold Brew Coffee, then he's in that advertisement.
Advertisement, yes.
Being classic Jared, as we would describe him. But him and his fiance are going to be getting married in November, and his family was throwing an engagement party for them down in New Braunfels. And I just went down there for Friday evening just to hang out with them a little bit because I had the time to. I didn't make it to the actual party thing because I had to work. I just kind of fit it in. And New Braunfels is only an hour away from here. Like to the river house that they were staying at in good traffic, it was literally maps quoted me like 45 minutes and I made it in like 40. So
that's awesome.
It was like no big deal to just jet down there and jet back. Aside from that, nothing else really happened. Just work. The extreme weather drop on Sunday evening fucked me up. I might sound a little bit sick. Maybe, I don't really know.
I thought you sounded like there was a little something going on, but I didn't want to say anything and make
it
you
was
self-conscious
just
about
whenever
it.
So I love the cold weather, but whenever weather changes in either direction extremely suddenly, my sinuses get fucked up. And I get, really awful allergies, and I've been like coughing and having like headaches and stuff since then. I'm finally at the end of it, which is fine, and hopefully this cold weather sticks instead of jutting back up to 80 degrees in a couple of days.
Yeah, like last year it killed all my plants because that's what happened. Like it would
just immediate.
It would rain or it would.
It was like
would
90
get
degrees
so
Sunday night.
Yeah.
And then woke up Monday and it was 40. Well, what the fuck is this? It's fine. Like I said, I love the cold weather, but I woke up, felt how cold, and was like, oh my god, the next 4 days are going to be fucking hell for me.
It throws you off. It makes it hard to get up in the morning sometimes. I mean, you just want to stay like warm.
I always have a hard time getting up anyways. But I knew that it was going to just ruin my sinuses and I was just going to be miserable at work, and I was.
And I was.
The forecast shows that it's going to be in the 50s and 60s for the next like 5 or 6 days. So hopefully that just means that fall's actually here for Central Texas and it doesn't change. In the most dramatic fashion ever, a 60-degree, 12-hour drop.
Yeah. I don't even think the water gets that cold. Like, doesn't it take 48 hours for water to change its temperature?
Depending on the size of the body of water, for sure.
What a weird statistic to know.
Obviously, right. Like the Gulf never really gets cold because it's a huge body of water that swirls. It just keeps itself warm. It doesn't mix a whole lot with the ocean until it gets to that point. Okay. So even in winter, it never gets like really cold. Yeah, it's not like when you go to California or the East Coast and get in an ocean when it is cold.
I didn't even realize it would be colder ocean over there. I don't know why I didn't think about that.
Yeah, the ocean is substantially colder than any Gulf or Bay ever is.
Yeah, and we grew up on the Gulf, so that's like most of my experience with the water. Unfortunately, it's not bad, but it's just
a swirly, nasty, dirty, seaweedy mess.
Yeah,
because it's just like a giant bathtub, and everything just sits in there and swirls around.
Seaweed's cool though. I mean, not on your feet, but as like an organism.
Speaking scientifically, seaweed's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, my week was cool.
You had to finish up your move, didn't you?
Yeah, it was the last the last official day where I turned the keys in was Monday. It was just like every single day. It was. I actually forgot that I did that. That wasn't even what I was going to talk about. No, yeah. So on Sunday, I ended up getting all of the last of the things moved, but it was just it was big stuff, and then all the little bitty crap that you were just like, oh, I'll just save it for future Jordan to put in a box with a bunch of other crap like it, and then obviously when you take it back to your new place, it's like, I don't want to unpack the box of crap because it's literally just like the box of miscellaneous crap. Like you almost would rather just go buy a new whatever it was that you're looking for. But so that was it's nice finally being done with the apartment, and just got to pay them their money, the cancellation fee and all that stuff, and then being settled into the house is that'll be a work in progress. You always hear people talk about 2 years later after they've moved, they finally unpack the last box, and I hope that's not me, because that would drive me bananas, because the garage is out of control. Kind of got into it with not my boss, but with somebody that likes to pretend to be my boss at work, and I had to stand up for myself, kind of just not let him walk all over me, and I'm not used to doing that, so that was kind of a big moment for me. Not to toot my own horn, but I guess I was proud of not of handling it without yelling, or I mean I don't yell really, but handling it in a mature way where I told him the way he approached me was, I found it kind of disrespectful. He was kind of accusing me of not really doing my job, and I told him if you want somebody else, because he kind of even threatened to get a different person in his store. I was like, if you want somebody else, you can get somebody else, but there won't be anybody better than me. And I come in here and I work my ass off every day, so I found it fair, like highly, like I find it offensive that you would accuse me of not doing my job. And anyway, it was just I told my boss, and I was like, hey, if they say anything, like, this is what I said, and I'm sorry. I stood up for myself. He's like, no, I completely agree with you, like, you're good, man. So that was cool. Weird, but it was, it was cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was off on Saturday. Doesn't matter. But yeah, so it was just doing the move and then that. Anyway, just crazy week. All that's through, and now we're back into this next week. It's been good. It's been just busy.
That's good.
Yeah.
It has been busy. I worked a double on Sunday and on Monday.
Damn.
So I was just like, and then with the sinuses on top of that, I was just like, fuck all of this, man.
What is a double for you? Is that 12 hours or is that like
open to close? So
like 10
I was there on Sunday. I was there. We open and close. Oh, we're open less hours on Sundays. I was there at 10 and I left at 8.
Okay, cool.
And then on Monday we had a department meeting at 8. So I was there at 8 and I was there until 9 in the evening.
Dang.
So I worked all available working hours at the store Sunday and Monday.
And then opening and closing, you probably have 30 minutes on each one of those ends.
Closing we leave as the store closes. With
that's
Geek
cool.
Squad is just unless something is happening at the last second, it's really easy to leave the second the store closes.
Oh, okay.
So that part's good. But opening, yes, I have like a 30-minute window to get in and just make sure shit's in order for idiot clients to come in.
Yeah, me.
Everybody. Everybody's an idiot, man.
Yeah.
Myself included, probably.
We're all in that spectrum. Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's get into it. Book 1 of book.
Book 1 of book. So this, as far as the book goes, this might be a relatively short episode this week, just because not a whole lot happens. The first several bits is just kind of introductory stuff, which makes sense. So we'll just start off in chapter 1. My notes say just that, just introductory stuff. We learned that the protagonist is a war hero. He's now stationed on Beacon 23, which is like a lighthouse. There are, and then it spends a lot of time talking about how there's a bunch of little sounds that are driving him crazy, and he's trying to track them down and figure out what they are. But they seem to run away from him when he approaches. Yeah,
that's actually the name of this book. When you look for something, it runs away. That's the name of this book. Mm-hmm. No, it's called Little Noises. So he's looking for those little noises, and he's setting traps for them because he thinks they're. I think it sounds at some point he kind of convinces himself that it's literal critters running around, and then at some points he convinces himself that it's just things banging and clanging that just are part of the ship. He also talks about how NASA is real picky. They don't like you calling it a lighthouse. It simplifies it too much. It almost feels like, but that's exactly what it is.
I don't know if it ever says why they don't like you calling it a lighthouse.
He kind of talks about it when we learn that there's like a whole underworld to lighthouses and stuff. He talks about how like it could in part like the image of like there being like dishonest work, like wrecking, when they're looting the ships and stuff. It had, so I don't know. I think the way it made it sound to me is like they just didn't even want it linked to lighthouses and that simple, like anything with that.
Yeah, maybe so.
I don't know. You're right. It doesn't seem to go too heavily into it.
The thing is that it's all so everything comes from his perspective. So it's almost like a first person narrative, except that he's talking to us sometimes. Whenever like a new passage starts, or even just like a new paragraph, he'll say something like, "I'm telling you this," so this is just like a first-hand account more than anything. So a lot of the ways that things are being said are kind of hard to decipher because it's not like a literal description, it's someone's perspective.
Right. And you did a really good job of like seeing, because sometimes he doesn't necessarily like explain why he's doing what he's doing, or maybe if he does, it's just very brief and then he does it and then it shows you why. When we were going over our notes, I saw that you had like a really good, you seem to be able to like tell exactly what was going on, which I mean, obviously that's what like the writer is trying to do, have you see what's going on. But that's just really interesting to me. I always like comparing notes with you and seeing what you picked up on. Anyway, yeah. So we learn about the GWB, the Gravity Wave Broadcaster. That's basically
the whole point of the beacon.
Yeah, the light of the lighthouse. It's I imagine it is sending out like these pulses of just kind of like letting you know where everything is in the atmosphere, because it seems like these beacons help them navigate through asteroid fields or navigate through things flying at them.
I don't know that it explicitly explains the entire thing, but what it seems to do is it picks up all the gravity signatures in the area and then broadcasts what the safe path through those gravity signatures is.
That's great. How you said that was awesome. I just imagined it in my head like this cool computing program, like calculating a route through all the debris.
But there is it talks about how with its gravity wave stuff that it does, it emits. It can like fuck with your brain a little bit. NASA says not to spend too much time near it, but presumably people that man the beacons do, because he certainly does. And there's a picture that's posted on one of the windows around the GWB from a previous operator.
Right.
So obviously somebody spent a lot of time in there as well. And what the waves do to your brain is they kind of make you feel like you're buzzed a little bit. He describes it as like 2 fingers of whiskey or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. Just like a constant drizzle of like 2-finger pour whiskeys.
Yeah, just enough to mellow you out. This is the first hint that we get at him having been an alcoholic. They talk about it a little bit later as well. But his description of it, and then of course him spending as much time as he does there, it's obviously something that he deals with.
Yeah, that seemed to be his fix too, just sitting in the GWB, sitting next to it and looking at that picture of the man at
He's kind of obsessed with it. It spends a lot of time talking about how he just thought that it was super cool. Or how that guy must be like a super badass, and then he sends in a research request about the photo and finds out that it was just totally staged, that they had him, that he wanted that picture taken, and then the second that they got the picture for that, like, the cool shot after that, he was just like, fuck, because that huge wave was coming in on everything.
Yeah, this is kind of where we get another window into, like, the protagonist's personality. It's sort of just, he says it's not like about what the actions are that you do. It's about like when you get your photo taken that makes you a hero. Because like that dude in the lighthouse, he's sitting there lighting a cigar like a stoic badass with like this tidal wave coming over and about to engulf him. And then they said that when he got the information about that photo, that those dudes were like, hey, there's a wave coming, you're gonna, and then he realized what was going on, and then he said he was shitting his pants and trying to get out of there. And it's just, I don't know, I feel like it gives you a window into just how our narrator thinks, like how the main character thinks. And
and it's everything kind of relates back to what he went through in the war and what ended up happening to him and stuff like that. And we learn more about all that sort of stuff later on as well. But everything gets related to that constantly. He always has some sort of flashback that's relative to what's happening in the moment, something to compare it to something that happened in the war.
See, yeah, and because of all that, I thought the war was still going on. And when we were going over our notes, you made it sound like you thought the war had ended. So I don't know if you read it or...
They say that the war ends, or at least the war between 2 specific armies ends.
Oh, okay.
There is a part where he's talking about, early on, where he's talking about catching news of the war from passing ships and stuff like that. So either the war started back up or a different war is on. But there is a part where the war that he's talking about having been through ended.
Yeah, okay.
In any case... that's pretty much all that happens in chapter 1.
Yeah, that was probably a little bit of juice from some of the other chapters too. So
definitely a little bit of overarching stuff. In chapter 2, we're still talking about the sounds. There's an alarm that goes off, wakes him up. It's an alarm that he knows is supposed to be specifically signaling that the GWB failed. There's about a paragraph and a half talking about how that's impossible. He gets to the control room to verify the message. As he's getting ready to go check out the GWB, he shoots off a message to Houston just to, even though they would have already gotten a notification that this failure was happening, he decided he would also report in.
Yeah, be proactive rather than reactive.
Doesn't run, throws himself, because the GWB doesn't have gravity along its tube. There's like a tube that leaves the control room that goes to where the GWB exists. He like climbs up it halfway, and then when the gravity fails, he throws himself down it because he's like super cool or whatever.
And I think it even talks about how he's done it so many times that a light grays on the wall with like one of his fingertips.
He can like course correct super easily.
Yeah, he knows how to course correct, which that's always been something fun like about space. And they even talk about it too, how there's like a no wake travel behind like a spacecraft. How there's no wake because he likes to relate it to the water, and that was just a concept I had never even thought of before. I mean, obviously, I don't think there's friction in space, right?
Well, there's no friction. There's nothing. Space is a void.
Yeah.
So there can't be friction unless you're hitting an object.
Yeah, which would be like when you see like the spaceships coming in from space, like it'd be them hitting the atmosphere and combusting and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's where that's where that comes from. So I didn't know.
So he goes down to down his relative. He goes to the GWB. The GWB is not on. It's cold, which means that it's not working. He unplugs it all, plugs it back in. During all this time, he's thinking about the shipping schedule, trying to remember if anything's coming through and how much longer he has. He remembers that there's a cargo ship coming through pretty soon, and then not too long after that, there's a luxury liner going to be coming through. He spends some time talking about how the GWB fries everything near it because of its gravitational waves.
It's a very important detail too, by the way. Just keep that one in the tip of your head.
So then after that, he goes back to the control room, then through the control room down to the power room, turns everything off and back on. He's performing a hard reboot on the system. There's some talk about self-healing chips and circuitry and stuff like that, so that if something does happen, everything can repair itself in time. After everything comes back on from the hard reboot, the GWB failure the alarm for the GWB failure goes off again. He's back in the control room at this point. He gets a message from Houston that just says, "What outage?"
Yeah, so they don't know, which is not good because they're supposed to know everything.
Yeah, they should have gotten an automated message, and they apparently didn't get one or didn't read it or whatever it is. So then the start of chapter 3 is just him talking about how NASA doesn't know anything. He's frustrated that they don't know that the failure happened. He is talking about how there's probably just some idiot there late at night just sipping on coffee and not paying attention.
Yeah, and how, this is a big deal, so he's not just going to sit there and let nobody like make the choices. He was like, I got to let them know, and he's got to act,
At this point, enough time has passed that he doesn't really know what to do. He goes back to where the GWB is and looks out the porthole. Pretty soon after he gets there, a cargo ship enters the asteroid belt in the area at 20 times light speed and explodes into a new star.
It was fun, the imagery they had on that, because he made a point of talking about how there was no sound when the cargo ship was destroyed, I guess, by asteroidal impact, right? Yeah. So it talks about how it was destroyed and there was no sound. So it kind of almost he made it sound almost romantic in a way because it was like such a huge feat, like a huge thing that's happening. Like for example, when I've seen glaciers and a piece of the glacier breaks off, it's always crazy to me how loud the ice is when it's sitting there cracking, and it's just like. I mean, I don't know how heavy the ice is, but it looks like just a little piece of ice, and then you hear just a, and then it falls, but with that is the sound that's appropriate for the situation. Whereas it was the ultimate annihilation and destruction of this cargo ship with who knows how much money worth of, contents it had on there, and is just out in free space now.
Yeah, I think because it comes in at 20 times light speed, fast. And there's no sound in space because there's nothing for the sound waves to travel through. It's a vacuum. And so there's nothing, and then crashes everywhere because everything came in so quickly and stopped so quickly that it was just like if you had a picture of the asteroid belt as it was and then a picture after an explosion. It was just like looking at the non-explosion picture and then at the explosion picture, and that's how quickly everything happened.
Yeah. That was chapter 3. It was like 4 minutes in the
and
audio.
Then he's thinking about how the luxury liner is on the way. So then on to chapter 4, there's several pages describing the process of an old profession of wrecking. How in the past, in real life with actual lighthouses and ships on the water, that people would do things to sabotage lighthouses so that ships would crash along the shore, and then they would go steal whatever cargo was on those ships so that they could profit off of it. This is when, because he's, like we were talking about, this is a first-hand account of everything, and it's basically, a first-person narrative. He's thinking about how he realized, or how he read about wrecking at one point whenever he was just bored reading. Mm-hmm. And this is what makes him realize that there was probably sabotage that happened, and that's why the GWB failed twice, and so quickly a period of time whenever that's supposed to be impossible to happen to begin with.
Yeah, like you said, they spend a good deal of time making sure we know that this piece of machinery, as old as it may be, it doesn't break.
Yeah.
And then this one did. So he goes through sabotage in his mind. He's like, sabotage it's got to be from like the inside. No one can pierce NASA's security system. And then it kind of flashes. It doesn't really flash. It just sort of has a memory of him making an offhanded trade with a ship.
Yeah, it is just a ship that is passing by and wants to mine the asteroids illegally. So they make a deal with him to. He's gonna send. He's trying to get something sent. Mm-hmm. I think it's the research request for the picture. Or something like
well,
that.
that's what he was picking up from them. They had the research request, I believe. They had
maybe so.
research.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, it was one way or the other. It was related to it. Yeah, and he wouldn't tell that they were mining illegally. And then that's when the bug must have gotten on. I think he likens it to like the plague and stuff like that, getting on board ships on the cargo.
He made a cool statement in the book too. He said social hacks are the easiest way in, which means basically it's easier to make somebody, like a human, another person, do something rather than to break like NASA's system. So like he's saying, like basically the only way in was to manipulate like a person like me,
right.
And then so that's kind of I think the last line of this chapter, which I thought was cool, was no time but to act. He realizes he is out of time because the luxury liner's coming in, and he's been sitting here thinking about wrecking.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he realizes that that's what's going on. Houston wants a situation report while he's typing out a response saying that it was that it's sabotage.
Oh yeah, what he did.
And all this sort of stuff. And then there's a luxury liner coming in. He's typing out a report to give back to them, and he's trying to think of what to do. And that's when he comes up with a plan. He thinks of a solution to eradicate the bugs. Because they're just going to deactivate the GWB after another reboot anyways. And he's got less than 10 minutes until the luxury liner arrives. So then, like you said, no time to think, just to act. So then we jump into chapter 5, which is where he starts doing all this stuff. He's having his cool dude moment.
Yeah, very cool dude moment, especially when you described it to me, because this it went a little bit over my head, I think, when I was listening. Maybe I wasn't as tuned in, like we were saying earlier. Mm-hmm. But when you explained it, I was like, oh, there we go. That's one, just like the glass ceiling was shattered.
It's just very procedural because it doesn't want to tell you what it is, because the whole thing is that you're supposed to either realize at some point what it is that he's doing and be like, oh yeah, that's really smart, or whenever it happens, be like, oh man, that was really cool, you know? Like it's a reveal of some sort, so it doesn't say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this, blah, blah, blah. It just is the action of everything happening. So he's goes back up to where the GWB is, disconnects it, and brings it down to the control room. Then he goes to the power room, throws all the breakers off, goes back to the control room, splices the GWB into a power source, back to the power room to throw the breakers on. It's at this time that the GWB fries everything in the area, and then also presumably the bugs.
Yeah.
Throws the breakers back off, goes to the control room, disconnects the GWB from the power that he had spliced it to, goes back to the power room, throws the breakers back on so that the beacon has power, and then he goes back to the control room, grabs the GWB, takes it to the lighthouse, splices the GWB in hot because he doesn't have time to go back down to the power room to turn it off so that he can go back up and slice it in carefully and then go back down to turn it on.
Yeah.
So he splices it hot.
I didn't even know you could do that, to be honest with you. I didn't know you could splice things hot like that. And I mean, I know you're not supposed to because you'll electrocute yourself, but like...
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely do it and different consequences may happen. Like you might hurt yourself or you might ruin whatever the thing is. But he knows what to do. He obviously spent a ton of time training on everything and knowing how everything works or whatever. Much like actual astronauts do. And then he's just sitting there waiting. He doesn't have a working clock in the lighthouse because he didn't wind the clock that was there. So he doesn't know how much time he spent doing all of this. He doesn't know when the luxury liner is supposed to come anymore. So he's just sitting there waiting. And it says that hours pass and nothing happens. So he knows that he made it in time.
Yeah, it was only supposed to be 10 minutes that he had, like, for a little window to do all this work.
Yeah.
That, you know, all this intense work to save all these lives, because we were saying it's a luxury liner, so it's like a cruise ship for space, taking you from, you know, place to place. And it's described as having like over 5,000 lives in transit.
So then that's the end of that chapter. And I think after that happened, I read up through that point the first night that I was reading. I wouldn't say that's like where I got hooked, but I was like, okay, this is, you know, pretty good. It's, you know, got stuff going on, and the way that it's being told is interesting enough that I'm definitely not going to regret continuing to read.
He's I think one of the last sentences there was, he's left to tend to the beacon and all of its pretty little noises, which, and you know, that's just another taste of his character's attitude, just sarcastically saying pretty little noises, kind of,
right,
and gives you another little taste of what our guy's like. We still don't have his name after a whole book, which I was surprised. I thought for some reason that I just missed it, but then, you know, we talked about it. It's like, nope, they just haven't given it. So that's a fun little mystery. I don't know how you pitch that idea of like a book. I'm going to have a book, but I'm not going to give you a character's name. Like, I'm just going to give you the story and then we'll fill it in later. Like, I don't know. It's just...
Well, it's all just narrative devices, right?
Yeah.
So it'll either play into something in some way, or we'll just end up not mattering at all. Or
yeah, it'll probably if it ends up being not mattering, it'll probably be offhanded, like, oh, you're blah blah from the that mission.
Yeah, it'll just be whatever.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, that was the end of, like you said, book 1, and then we started book 2.
Yeah, we're moving to that chapter 6.
It's called Pet Rocks.
There's a few pages talking about the week after the accident. NASA came to remove the bugs and repair different things. Wreckage was covered by the news and picked clean of valuables by scavengers. Side note, it's at this point that my Kindle decided that it was going to stop tracking the pages. The edition on Kindle is so poorly coded that there's not chapter bookmarks either. So I have to go through everything very manually, which is substantially less easy than it is with an actual physical book.
Yeah.
And so it's just a huge pain in the ass. And
I
whoever put together this version of the book was absolutely lazy. There's no excuse for it. Whoever coded this version of the book is awful and lazy and did not try at all.
Take some pride in your work. All right, you're the Kindle programmer for Hugh Howey. All right.
Well, the thing is that for the most part, people self-publish their stuff to Kindle.
That is what it said about Hugh Howey, like how Hugh Howey had gotten a little bit.
I mean, I guess it's really like anything. If whoever has the publishing rights is the one who does the publishing, so obviously, like whoever has the publishing rights for Harry Potter is the one that puts it on Kindle. If a book is self-published, then the author has to publish it to Kindle or whatever.
That's cool.
So I think it was Hugh Howey that published this to Kindle, and it's just so poorly put together.
Yeah.
It's making me angry. But whatever, the story so far is good, so we'll continue on. The protag has been sleeping in the lifeboat with his suit on, his space suit on, in case the debris that's coming from the wreckage compromises the beacon's integrity. There's one night where he's sleeping and an alarm goes off. So he goes to the control room to see what the alarm is all about. Sees that it's the bioscanner. There's also a message from NASA on the computer. They're saying that they have got a read on a life signature and to check the scanners. So he checks the scanners, sees that there's something 32 kilometers away. So he reports back to NASA, yeah, I see it, it's 32 kilometers away. Then NASA reports back to him, says, go check it out.
Go check it out. And that's exactly what he didn't want to do, which is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was cool. I don't know how fast we can talk nowadays, like, to NASA from space, but it was saying that their connection was a live connect. It was instantaneous, which I thought was neat.
So it's like a theoretical thing called quantum entanglement.
Oh,
and what it is that there's two particles that are quantumly entangled.
Okay.
And whatever you do to one of them, the same thing will happen to the other one, and they can be infinitely apart.
Oh, cool.
And because they're fourth dimensionally tied, effectively. Mm-hmm. It's something that can theoretically be used for long distance travel or communications in that way. For it still be immediate.
That's like a real thing. Like we're doing research on that now.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm sure people are figuring it out or whatever, talking about it. But this is the only reason I know about that is because this is not the first time that quantum entanglement communications has popped up in some sci-fi thing that I've read or watched or played or whatever.
Yeah. I was about to ask how you knew that. I don't even necessarily know what the word quantum means. I assume 4. That's quad. Quantum. I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
As a word on its own, I don't know what its literal definition is, but that's like quantum physics and all that sort of stuff. It's all referencing, it's all like, fourth dimensional theory.
Oh, okay.
Basically. In a very poorly explained nutshell.
Well, no, that's good enough for...
For context, that's enough.
Yeah, for what we needed. Well, cool. So that was Chapter 7 that NASA, at the end of Chapter 7, NASA tells him to go check it out. And then Chapter 8 is what you were about to start talking about.
It's just, all that happens in Chapter 8 basically is just, it's more... So much of this is exposition because it's just him. Mm-hmm. So he hops in this little like auxiliary pod that he has, and then he flies it to where the signature is. There's a lot of description about as he's flying the thing, he looks back at the beacon and is kind of just like, oh geez, what a piece of shit.
Yeah, I live in that. He describes it as, when he looks at it, it's an off-white can in an oil slick of black, which just the infinity of space is
right.
Fun.
He's he's just like in the middle of nowhere, near an asteroid belt. Mm-hmm. He's not like in orbit around a planet or anything. So there's like,
that's a good point. I never really thought about that.
So there's just nothing to mark it against. So it's just literally a little piece of shit that he can squeeze around in the middle of the vast black of space.
Yeah, it's supposed to never break. So.
Right. Then it talks about when he gets closer to the asteroid field and where all the wreckage is, and he's seeing all the different things that had come off of the cargo ship that weren't valuable enough to be taken by the scavengers.
Wreckers, yeah. He describes it as an asteroid field inside of an asteroid field. So
there's a bunch of shit. There's a bunch of toilet seats for some reason.
Yeah,
I guess there was probably just like a shipment of toilet seats, but looting toilet seats is probably not the most lucrative thing to waste fuel on carrying through space.
You don't think that porcelain worth something?
Nah.
I don't even think toilet
certainly
seats
not collecting them all for them to be in like one huge package. Maybe worth it, but
maybe.
But collecting them across an asteroid field, no. There's like mail that's been spread around as well as something that gets described.
Does he ever see a body? Because it says that there were 8 members.
He assumes there were 8 crew members.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he ever gets a definitive answer on it, or at least I don't remember it saying so. But he doesn't ever come across anything.
Okay.
Eventually, he gets within range of the signal of whatever the life signature is, and pinpoints it. Figures out that it's a little box, a little wooden box that's there. He grabs it with the arm of the thing and then flies back to the beacon.
Yeah. He makes a note about how he's a little bit disappointed that it wasn't like a life form that he got to save, like something with that would appreciate him saving it. He's thinking that it's probably just some mold that grew on something in space. He's just he writes NASA goes bonkers for mold, but so he's just bummed out that he's not
a bunch of nerds.
Yeah, he's not saving anybody's life. He's just basically doing fancy research, opportune research, I would say. Taking advantage of the situation, but
right. I don't know that he's necessarily even bummed out. I think that because he didn't even want to go out to begin with. He was hoping NASA wouldn't tell him to send him out there.
Right.
Then he gets there, and as he gets closer to the life signature and it becomes more tangible because it's right there.
Oh, maybe that's it.
He's then just like, well, whatever it is, it's a life signature, and I'm here, so I gotta save it or whatever.
Yeah.
But then whenever he sees it, it's like just a wooden box, and he's like, well, this obviously isn't a human life. He's just like, okay, well, whatever it is, NASA's gonna want it, and I'm here, so here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, he's there to do a job, not necessarily to... Yeah, because he wasn't being heroic. Yeah, he was just... Yeah, he was doing it because he's told to.
Right. So then they get back.
Yeah, they get back.
He gets back to the beacon, and he's inspecting the box in the airlock because if there's something contaminant in the box, he can purge the airlock and be safe. It won't be a big deal. There's some mention about this OCD part of his personality that he calls his OCD roommate that's bugging him about going through the procedures correctly and stuff like that. On the box, there's a shipping label that shows that it was intended for a Professor Allard Bachman at a university on Oxford. Saying on Oxford kind of lets us know that Oxford is a planet.
Yeah, I liked the name Bachman because so Stephen King has a pseudonym. Is that what it's called when you have a fake name? Like an author name, like you.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's got a pseudonym and it's Richard Bachman. I don't know how it's spelled in the book, but the way they pronounce it is the way that I've always heard his name pronounced, and so it made me think of Stephen King. It probably has no relation, but I like the name. That was his old, pen name. But
then he has some paranoia about what created this hole that he sees in the box. Realizes that maybe it's something that broke out of the box. So then, because he's becoming paranoid, he feels like he has something itching on him inside of his suit, so he starts freaking out. He's tearing off the spacesuit. But then realizes that it's just that the spacesuit is itchy because he's been wearing it for a week.
Yeah.
And he's already been itching, so he kind of chills out a little bit, but then he hears a scratching from inside the box and a voice.
Talk about anxiety, dude. That's so much pressure to just be in that beacon by yourself, and then you got all those lives on the line. I mean, it seems like nothing usually goes wrong, but they definitely train them in case something goes wrong.
Right, yeah.
And it just, being so secluded from everything, that sounds just like, put him in the box, put him in the shoe. What do they say on the prison shows?
I don't know.
Well, when you put him in solitary confinement is kind of what I meant by that. It seems like he's just put himself in a solitary confinement. Yeah, he's kind of put himself in his own little prison out there.
We'll move on to chapter 10.
Yeah, chapter 10.
So in chapter 10, starts off, he opens the box. There's some sort of locking mechanism that he spends some time figuring out. Very procedurally, he just, in the same way that you might do puzzles in a game of some sort, just go through literally every combination until you get it right.
Yeah, he spent some time in the chapter before describing how the box, it looked like it was masterfully crafted, like it was either crafted by a master woodsmith or whatever, it was either done by somebody that was really good, or it was done by a computer that was programmed to make it with imperfections like a human. So it was just he even says it's how could critics even enjoy anything if you can't even tell what's man-made anymore.
It's just the future.
Yeah, it's the future issues.
So he gets the box open, there's a rock in there, and the rock is talking.
How did he get the box open? Didn't he just pushed the three little...
He went through all possible combinations until he found the combination that opened the lock.
See, I thought he did that and it still wouldn't open. For some reason, I thought he did it right, and then it was just jammed because it was busted. I don't know where I got that. But anyway, go on with what you were saying. I'm sorry.
So the box opens and there's a rock in there, and the rock is talking. And then there's a little bit of him thinking about how he went through all these different flashcards at NASA of different alien life forms, and he's just going through all of those to try and remember what alien this might be. This alien isn't anything that he remembers having learned. But in going through this little exposition of how he learned about aliens, is the author introducing the idea that aliens exist in this universe, and that everybody knows that there are aliens in this universe. And so this isn't a discovery moment. There ends up being a lot of dialogue with the rock, just a lot of back and forth. The rock wants to know where are they, when does he get to go back home, and all this sort of stuff. And so it's just some back and forth to establish character. Nothing really big happens.
It's a British accent on the Rock, by the way. The Rock has a British accent. They're just there's just this back and forth between the two characters that they're both just snippy with each. Not snippy. They're just both kind of douchey to each other. It's just, I don't know. It's very tough love kind of stuff. And our protagonist sends a 55 to Houston, which I thought was cool to just say, a 55. So he sends the 55 down to Houston, letting them know, in case you guys are wondering, everything's all good up here. We're A-okay. He does that to kind of just, I think, fill the time, because he's
he needs to report back to Houston, because he hasn't since coming back from checking for the life signature.
Good point. I was thinking he was just trying to fill in the awkward time, trying to talk to this rock. Like, he's just like, I'll do this for a second. But yeah, he tells that rock that the next supply shuttle that was going to come was going to be in 3 months. So not for a little while.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit.
Yeah, and he realized he needed to give a name to the rock.
So he names it Rocky.
Of course he does. The rock was not amused at all. Kind of rolls his rock eyes at him.
A lot of the initial dialogue with the rock is just he doesn't have like a real concept of it being a being. Mm-hmm. Because one, it's an alien. Two, it's a rock alien. And so he sees it as a rock, and so he just thinks of it as being a rock.
Right, and when have you ever had to do anything
it's just
with
hard for him to wrap his head around it. Like it's a thing, it's talking, it has conscience, it should be treated as such. But it looks like a rock, and it's not something he's ever seen before, so he just has a hard time getting around that. He also hasn't talked to anybody in a really long time, so it's really easy for him to be completely glib and without a lot of respect.
Yeah, he seems kind of ADD too, as like he starts talking to Rocky. Like he seems kind of just like his mind is all over the place. Like he can't get enough questions out. It's like a kid trying to have a conversation. But like you said, it's been a long time, like 6 months. I think he said he had 18 months left after that cargo ship crashed or whatever.
Yeah, because there's like a 2-year stint that you do on the beacon.
Right, so he's done the first
it's been
quarter.
6 months, yeah.
Anyway, so he talks to Rocky. He learns about Rocky's homeworld.
Yeah, we get a little bit of backstory of Rocky, where he came from, what his deal is. He's like the professor that was on the shipping label. Oh. He's that professor's research assistant, and he had just finished his internship on some other planet called Delphi, and he's on his way back to Oxford.
He's studying philosophy, so he's a philosopher's stone, which I thought that was actually kind of funny. That was the best pun I think that they made.
So then there's a point in the conversation where Rocky is like, wow, you really got fucked up in the army, because the protagonist is just constantly laughing about little things and making fun of Rocky because, again, he still can't wrap his head around it being a being.
Yeah, he asks him, he's like, what do you call a group of your kind? Like, if a group of y'all get together, like a herd for cows, we'd call it a herd. So what would it be for you? Would it be a bag of rocks? And Rocky's not amused still.
Yeah.
But like, what would you call a group of humans? A gaggle? No, that's geese. What do you call a group of people?
I think, well, it would just be relative to the situation.
I know, but the way he asked him was like, almost like we've got a word for it too. So what do y'all call it?
No, I think this is just more evidence of him not thinking of it as a being with rights.
Okay. Or
like, because, like, yeah, it's like a herd of cows or a flock of seagulls and things like that. But that's because we're just quantifying an animal. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, it doesn't deserve any like greater respect than just like the literal quantification of it.
There's a mass of them.
Whereas like a group of people, or like a party, or like a household, or a company, like it's all relative because humans do things and bring context to what they do. Where animals are just animals, they don't bring context to anything. They're doing their own shit existence or whatever.
Yeah, they're hunting or surviving. They're just doing their thing.
And so that's why Rocky the whole time is just like, well, fuck you, man. Like you're such an asshole. You're treating me like I'm just like a thing. Like I'm just a like an animal, or not, even though you're talking to me and you're getting answers out of me. I'm, subhuman in the way you're treating me, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, he says he's the worst human he's ever met.
Right. So after the bag of rocks bit, that's when Rocky's like, well, Jesus Christ, what the hell fucked you up in the war so bad? That made you such a piece of shit, effectively. And then that's when he starts talking about it, and we learn a bunch of different stuff about his time in the army. We learn that he was a pilot, for starters, in the Void War, is what it's called. There's a description about how the Void War was just totally fucking pointless. It's not like they were even fighting over, like, rocks or anything, which I guess is probably why it was called the Void War, because they were literally just fighting over the void.
Yeah.
And then he loses his wings and gets moved to the front for the Blitz, is what it's called, which was either part of the same war or a different war, because he does talk about how he spends 3 tours with the army. At some point that gets mentioned. Mm-hmm. The reason he loses his wings, it doesn't say it in this exact moment, but we get another mention of how he's a drunk at some point. So that's why he loses his wings. And then he gets put onto the front line for the Blitz, which may or may not be another war. We don't really know. He gets several promotions during this specific tour of duty, just because it says that he gets promotions because of attrition, because he just keeps surviving and everybody else dies.
Yeah, not a good way to get promoted.
Right. Not necessarily because of anything good beyond survival. Mm-hmm. And then there's a description of what ends up being the last day that he fought, or the last time that he does anything when he decides to stop fighting. He's a lieutenant at this point, and he takes his team and does like a push against what they call the Rife, or the Reef, or whatever it is. It's RYPH is how it's spelled.
I think he says Reef in
the audio.
But
whatever it is. So against the Reef, he pushes against them pretty hard. They make it to a place where there's like what is described as an entire nest of hives that they could take out. But it would probably end up costing 3 different platoons, which would have been the right thing to do because they could have seriously turned the tide of the war. Mm-hmm. For some reason, he decides he's not going to do that, though. And it's at that moment that the Reef pull back as a result of his initial push with his squad.
Wasn't it a suicide mission if he had continued to push into the hive? Like, he would have for sure.
Well, more than likely.
Oh, okay.
It's not like it was described as a suicide mission, or like it was like a mission given to him as a suicide mission.
Right.
He was just like, I could go in there and take out this entire nest of hives.
Yeah.
But it'll be really difficult and probably will cost 3 platoons.
I like how they describe the enemy, or not even necessarily enemy, but the opposing forces as being like a hive. Like, it almost dehumanizes them, so they might not be humanoid.
Well, they're aliens.
Right. I don't know. The word I wanted to use was human, I guess, but it takes value away from them because turns them into like bugs. Makes it in my mind it's easier to squish like a hive mind of bugs rather than like to kill an individual. I don't know. It's
it would be interesting to know what the relation between humanity and other alien races are, mm-hmm. and how long. That's another thing with there not being any real dates given. Is how long have we known about these other aliens?
Yeah.
Because if whatever the Reef are, if we've only just met them, or if the humans in this story have only just met them in the past, like even like 50 years or something like that, then yeah, they might not think of them as anything but subhuman and mm-hmm. Not worthy of anything really, just something to conquer or without any remorse for killing them. But maybe they've also known about the Reef for as much as 1,500 years. And so that maybe that's not a thing that's happening.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not a matter of just crushing a bug or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they are, whatever their society is enough that they get called hives. Maybe they call their own things hives.
Yeah.
There's so much context that we don't have.
That's what a group of those aliens is called.
A hive. There's just so much context that we don't have.
Yeah, and I projected a lot from actually this.
That's all that we get to do, effectively, is just project our own understanding of it because there's nothing given to us.
I mean, I straight up stole stuff from another book, like because it sounds a lot like Ender's Game, like the alien race in Ender's Game is like a hive mind kind of thing. And I don't know, when it described them as like being a hive, it made me think of just like, you remember that episode of Rick and Morty where they have Unity, the Unity episode where it made me think of something like her. A hive mind, like a single queen that kind of like controls all the masses in
Yeah, I was definitely envisioning the Zerg from StarCraft.
Oh, there you go. See, it turns them monster. It rather than them being an equal humanoid or something, it turns them into like a monster that we're fighting, which just makes it easier to do. I guess makes it easier to kill him.
For whatever reason, whenever he decides that he's not going to do that action, which would have been the right action for the war, as a result of his initial push, his aggressive initial push, the Reef pull back and the war ends. It says something like he never bothered to find out why 2 armies decided not to kill each other that day, but to just kill each other the next day. He didn't care to find out. He wakes up in a hospital with all his shit sewn back in, and that's why he's the hero, because he was the one that didn't die.
Says he got his guts ripped out by a lord. That's what his little like play over of NASA talking about his initial request or whatever, and how he didn't get a brain trauma like a lot of people that go to the beacons get, like, they seem to suffer some sort of head trauma.
Wakes up in the hospital, his gut's sewn back in. There's a visit from some general, some 4-star general, or whatever the equivalent is in this Army's ranking system.
Boss's boss.
Yeah. So upper brass comes in to visit him. He's all smiles, and he's, proud of this soldier that came out of his army or whatever. And he's like, what post do you want? You can have anything that you want, blah, 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 blah. The protagonist just wants to be alone. And then the only quote that I took from this entire episode's worth of reading, I remember the old man's smile fading, how the scars across his lips came back together, which let me know that he hadn't been smiling when whatever caused those scars happened to him. He walked away, but he granted me my wish. What I take from that is that that old general had obviously been through some shit. His lips are all fucked up, and so he probably himself pretty well knew what it was like to go through things like that. And so whenever our protagonist is like, I don't want to do any of this sort of thing again, I want to just send me somewhere where I'll be alone, he was just like, all right, like I get it, or whatever.
Yeah.
And while it wasn't what he wanted, because I assume whenever you get to that position, then you start not just thinking about the literal, like, day-to-day operations of a war and the army, but you've also got to think about ways to promote things. He could have this hero that he can, pin, not necessarily propaganda, but effectively propaganda on, and be like, look, now he's over at this post and he's going to be doing this thing for humanity, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But so he doesn't get that, so he's disappointed, but at the same time, he's like, okay, yeah, I fucking get it.
Well, also, too, after you just said what you did about him going through some shit of his own, how he got, like, his face cut up. You don't get very many face injuries and not have, like, a story to tell. So, like, when you said that it wasn't the answer he wanted, it's probably because that's not what he said when he was offered the same thing. Like, he was probably offered something very similar, like because just of like what you said.
Right. Yeah. So it wasn't the choice that he made as well. So
yeah,
a little bit of disconnect.
Yeah.
And then I have a little insight here where this is all just the protagonist having never talked about everything that kind of happened to him in the war. He had at one point gone to an army shrink after all this sort of stuff, probably while he was in training with NASA, but gave up on it the first time he tried it because he just wasn't ready about it. This is when, now that he's gotten all of this off his chest, this is when he realizes that Rocky is just a rock. He, for whatever reason, it just kind of comes to him, he realizes it, he's looking at the hole in the box, and he's sort of picking at the splinters, and then that's when he realizes that the life signature was the actual box itself, and Rocky was just a rock that punched through it. So then in chapter 12, we jump ahead a little bit. It's been a few days, we don't know how many days, but several days. The protagonist is talking about the idea that there's an old saying that bad things come in threes. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about how he thinks that's bullshit, but for the sake of counting, he talks about the 3 bad things that happened.
Yeah.
1, the accident. 2, his ordeal with Rocky,
mm-hmm.
and realizing that, he's going a little bit crazy out there. And then 3 was when the gravity went totally shit, and he gets thrown around the beacon a lot. So right now he's got a dislocated shoulder that he's got in a sling, what might be a light fracture in his foot, and he's bruised to hell. So when it cuts to him into this moment when he's thinking about all this stuff, he's in the middle of rigging up a bunch of kill switches around the beacon so that no matter where he is, if the gravity goes crazy again, he can just punch one of those switches and kill the gravity rather than get thrown around nonstop. Mm-hmm. And then while all this happens, there's an alarm that goes off, and the alarm is a whole proximity alert. So he goes to the there's this talk about how it's just a doorbell chime, but it's just him saying ding dong that he recorded because the actual whole proximity alert alarm was like raid sirens, mm-hmm. and he wasn't about that because it would give him war flashbacks like everything does.
Yeah.
So he just recorded himself saying ding dong and replaced the audio file for the whole proximity alert. So he gets to the control room, gets on the panel, sees that it's a ship, gets a message over the radio from the bounty hunter. Bounty hunter is saying, I'm here on whatever the organization, not the organization, whatever the
Delphi?
Overarching whatever the government system is. It's not like, maybe it says it was the United Nations or something. I don't remember. But whatever the government is, mm-hmm. It says that he's there on that government's martial business. Protagonist is says something about how Beacon is under NASA jurisdiction, not government jurisdiction necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So then he says, well, I'll beam you the warrant. Warrant checks out. So then the is like, okay, well, go to this dock. Also, I'm under quarantine, so if you really shouldn't come aboard, because he's afraid. He doesn't want anybody to see the mess that the beacon is in, because all this shit's still thrown around from whenever the gravity went crazy, and he's just kind of like, I don't want any, and he doesn't want anybody to see like his jerry-rigged kill switches that are probably not authorized either.
Well, it also talks about him being like when he meets the bounty hunter, how he's like in his boxers, like he didn't even change, like he's been running around in like his underwear all day, like
yeah, working. He's just like in no state. He doesn't want anybody coming in seeing the shit that he's in and like reporting anything.
Yeah, he went to Beacon 23 to not meet people.
Yeah,
not to meet up with Dog, the bounty hunter, in space.
Right. So then they go to the airlock, and that's where they meet. They meet in the airlock. So the ship is called Sanity's Edge. The bounty hunter of Sanity's Edge looks like he's trying really hard to look like a space bounty hunter. It talks about his outfit and how extra it is.
Yeah, I literally just thought Dog, but I put him in space and gave him dreads.
Yeah.
Dog could have dreads.
Like I guess he could.
Yeah,
I guess
he
anybody
could pull it
could.
off.
Oh, okay.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, anybody could have dreads, Jordan.
Yeah,
that was a brilliant observation.
I'm into the observational stuff.
His name is Mitch O'Shea. He's got a wanted poster for this woman who's got short cropped hair. It's described as. Asks the protagonist if he's seen her. Obviously, the protagonist hasn't seen her. Hasn't seen anybody.
Yeah.
And then Mitch is like, okay, well, you're going to have to give me access to all your scan logs and all the stuff, for the past week or whatever, because there's evidently some really good reason to suspect that this person has been through the area.
Yeah.
So he wants to go through everything to check against, I guess, his information about what the person is, what spaceship she's flying and different things like that.
It also seems like we get a little taste, too, of how socially awkward the protagonist is becoming, because he's like, he doesn't seem to really even know how to interact too well with Mitch. They seem like to get on okay, because Mitch probably has to deal with Beaconites, or whatever you call them. He probably has to deal with these guys all the time.
He probably has to deal with a lot of different people just being a bounty hunter and going about.
That's a better point than having to deal with just the Beacon people. But yeah, being a bounty hunter, dealing with different characters,
And then as he's asking for all that additional information, the ding-dong proximity alert goes off again. Protagonist says, hey, can I look through your windows? Because it's a lot of fucking effort to go back to mine, because my shoulder's all fucked up, as you can see.
Yeah.
And Mitch is like, okay, sure, yeah, don't touch anything. So then they go into the Sanity's Edge. They pass this alien dog thing.
Speaking of that alien dog, it describes it as like if a leopard and a dog were fused together, right?
Something like that. Yeah,
I can't even
weird, because it's just an alien creature.
So in my head, the only way I could make it a dog and like a cat fusion, because they're kind of similar looking animals anyway, just four legs and a tail and stuff. In my mind, I just made it like the most like different dog body I could think of. So like a pit bull / like boxer bulldog body and like a cat face.
I think that he at some point describes it. The thing that he can relate it most to is the mountain lions that he would see on occasion in the backwoods of Tennessee. I think that's what it says.
And he seems to have a very weird view of how dangerous and not dangerous mountain lions are. Because he says that they're not like threatening, or maybe he's just trying to act
because
tough.
they're not really.
I wouldn't want to mess with one.
Well, you don't want to mess with one, but one's not going to mess with you unless you give it no choice.
Oh.
If you come across a mountain lion just out in the wild, if you're not fucking with it shit or trying to get too close, it's just going to run away. Because it's scared of you too.
Yeah. He made it seem like he could take him. Like, I could take that dog.
Well, and then he says, what he says about the dog thing specifically, he asks why it's in the cage or something like that, or he makes a joke about it being in the cage. And then Mitch makes a joke back saying, nah, I put it in the cage so that it wouldn't maul you. Okay. And then he's just like, he's looking at the thing. It's called Cricket, yeah, like you said. He's looking at Cricket and he says, I don't think he says to himself that he doesn't think it's particularly dangerous because it looks kind of like a goofy fucking just like a dog thing, just like just being like goofy and friendly.
Yeah.
So he's like, I don't. Maybe it is literally dangerous, but it doesn't look like it's gonna be dangerous.
So he sees that dog on the walk to the cockpit. Yeah, and he looks through the window and he sees another ship that is
describes it as vaguely military, which he doesn't like, but he likes it more than he likes things that are obviously military or something, just some weird thing like that. The way that he thinks about and describes things and the way that the narrative goes is that everything is just very stream of consciousness, where we're just taking a lot of his literal thoughts, thought by thought, sort of delivery. It's just kind of a weird narrative presentation. Whenever they look at it, Mitch obviously recognizes what it is. He starts like cursing and he's like, motherfucker, blah, blah. He's all mad about it. And then gets on the radio and starts talking shit to him, to the other ship, saying like, it's illegal to put like a tracking device on me, blah, blah, blah. And then the guy's like, I don't have to have a tracking device to follow you. You're so shitty and stuff. Yeah. They're just like insulting each other. They obviously know who each other are and they don't like each other. Then the protagonist grabs the radio and says, this is Beacon 23's controller. What do you want or whatever. And then the guy on the ship says, this is Vlad. I guess his full name is Vlad something.
Vladimir something, yeah.
And then says, I'm here says the same thing that Mitch says effectively. It says, I've got a warrant, blah, blah, blah. And then Mitch says, don't let him dock. You don't have to. Gives him an excuse that he could have given him. And he's like, well, why didn't you tell me that I could have told you that, blah, blah. And I guess at that point, then he's kind of like, despite Mitch, he says, yeah, go ahead and dock on this dock, blah, 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 blah. And Mitch is like, God damn it. So what I'm assuming is happening is that Vlad follows Mitch around for bounties.
It seems, so I guess,
so that's why Mitch is mad, because it's happened before.
Yeah, and at this point, too, we don't know who's good and who's bad. We don't know if the bounty hunter has a negative connotation around it, or if like he's kind of the good guy in this situation. We don't know if they're both, for a different good, We don't really know the intentions behind the people.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know the intentions, but it's probably safe to assume that they're just like all bounty hunters are always depicted one way or the other. Or they can be one way or the other, who knows. They're really just, just like privateers were back in old ship days. The whole purpose was just to sort of be outside the law and make money doing so officially. Not get in trouble for it.
Is there like a code? You know how like with pirates they have like parlay. How you meet up so you can discuss things and then you have your parlay. Do you think they have anything like that? It seems like there was a code that the protagonist was following. That it is the rules. Like they're not bound by any government jurisdiction. So if you have a warrant, you can come and look. But it seemed almost like he was honor bound to do as much as he could. Like if they wanted to come on the beacon. Well, he was bound
by the law.
Well, yeah, that's true. Probably more just that then.
Because he says, just as his first his first line of defense, because he didn't want anybody coming on the ship, period. At first he doesn't talk about the warrant. He says, I'm looking for somebody, blah, blah, I want to come aboard. And then he says, you don't have any jurisdiction to just come aboard unless you have a warrant or express permission from NASA. And then that's when Mitch says, well, I have a warrant. He's like, okay, well, fine. Yeah, come on.
Get a warrant.
For the same reason that cops don't get to just burst into your house without a warrant or probable cause, which probable cause means that they can do whatever they want. But in this situation, because it's outside the government's jurisdiction, the beacons, they have to either have a warrant or express consent from NASA to do so. So those apparently are the only two criteria, and the bounty hunters have one of those criteria in this situation.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe that's the code that I was trying to come up with. Like it's not an understood code that they all follow. Like,
in this situation, it's not. He's just following the law.
Yeah.
In this specific situation,
like in Waterworld, there's like a protocol between two boats, and if you see another boat, you always stop. Like it's because you never see anybody else out on the water very often. Like you always make a point to stop.
Waterworld is also a situation where there is no law.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of post-apocalyptic.
There's no government or anything like that.
Yeah, there is still very clearly government here, yeah.
So that's the end. That's the end of our reading section.
Yeah, no, they're just going to go meet Vlad now.
We'll see what happens there.
So, well, that was part 3 of the book. The first chapter of book 3, and I guess the whole series of Beacon 23 as like a whole piece of work. So that was a cool point to stop, I thought. I kind of liked that we didn't necessarily stop at the end of one of the books.
It ended up being a pretty decent drop off.
Yeah.
And, to leave what's going to happen next, because obviously they're going to go meet Vlad.
Mm-hmm.
Mitch and Vlad don't like each other. What's going to happen? They're not going to kill each other on a beacon.
Yeah.
But there's going to be like a confrontation, and then what happens from there, because they're obviously, maybe not so, obviously might not be the right word, but they're going to have to deal with whatever this wanted woman is all about.
Yeah, that seems to be the next plot.
That's the that's the through line of this section of the anthology of Beacon 23, where the first story was the ship thing, the explosion and the GWB going out. The second thing was Rocky, and now this bounty hunting thing is this tale of this anthology.
This seems to be just like a tale of things breaking. It's like the first was the tale of the cargo ship breaking, and then the second book was a tale of his mind kind of breaking, and this last one is them breaking into to his ship kind of.
Right.
So
I think what it's going to end up being overall is just a story of the protagonist going through some level of rehabilitation, and he just has all these different little adventures that contribute to that overarching thing. I think that's probably it. I mean, he either ends up dead or has some sort of revelation, and then goes back home to home, relatively speaking, goes back to civilization, and presumably is in a better position to integrate than he was before.
When you get your picture taken. That's what he says. Man, I really can't tell yet if if either of these guys that we've run into, like if Mitch or Vlad. I mean, I know we just said it, but I can't really tell if either of them are good or bad yet. Like you can't tell their.
I don't think it matters.
Overall intent. Yeah,
because they're going to be gone in a couple of sections anyway.
I want more people. How'd you like it?
I'm enjoying it. Mm-hmm. I enjoy the way that it's written, the sort of stream of consciousness that happens. I think I relate to the protagonist a lot in the way that he sees everything and the way that he talks about everything. His sense of humor is really funny to me. The sort of manic thing that was happening when he was dealing with Rocky wasn't necessarily the part of his sense of humor that I liked. It's all the other sort of sarcasm and the negative way that he looks at everything and reacts to how everything happens. That's the sort of thing that I relate to more than anything.
There's a comment he made before he actually went out to go get Rocky that he was like, well, I've already been wearing this suit for a week, so it smells like me. I don't even have to change. Like, I can just get in my suit and it doesn't smell like some stinky somebody else.
Right.
It already smells with my stink. And he's like, that's the positive outlook that got me through the war. And it's just like, well, that's funny.
Yeah.
So how far do you want to get in this next bit? Do you want to end it on a book? Do you want to just go for another chunk?
So this week we'll just read through chapter 24. So stop at chapter 25.
Yeah, first 12 done. So we'll see how it goes. I think we're going to learn a lot.
See you guys next week. I'm Will Hedrick.
And I'm Jordan Schaffer.
This was Dog Ears and Timestamps. Boy.